special meeting of the Niles, Maine District Library Board for May 6, 2024 at 5:37. Please take the roll.
Trustee Kadir? Trustee Kadir is
Present.
next. Oh, you are.
there we are.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee Kadir is on virtually with us. Trustee Derbelik?
Here.
Trustee Derbelik is on with us virtually, and Trustee Schoenfeld?
Here.
Present. Treasurer Botello?
Present.
Here. And Secretary Rosansky? Here. And Vice President Trunko?
I am here.
Excellent. Vice President Trunko is on virtually with us, and President Key.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 4 trustees in person and have a quorum in person, and the other trustees are joining us remotely due to work-related issues. So please let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and for public comment, we have Elliot Osherman.
Good evening, Board. This is Elliot Osherman. Inasmuch as this is a training session for the Board, I will skip my non-usual declarative statements about being neither interrupted nor silenced, about remembering Board actions, and voting in 2025 for the next library election, 10 months, 24 days away. I have given your Executive Director copies of these comments so you can follow along and address my comments to the entirety of the Board. I would reiterate some of my prior comments about privileges and responsibilities of the Board officers, of the Board members, and the library public, including those who are constituents of the library district, many of whom are taxpayers. But tonight is a training session. I would have the Board and the public note that on May 31st, 2022, prior to the special Board meeting, I left a copy of a book on Carolyn Derbelik's desk. It was authored by a parliamentarian expert and a guide to Robert's Rules of Order. The next Board meeting was on June 15, 2022. In that afternoon, I noticed the book still on Carolyn Derbelik's desk, apparently ignored, apparently unread, possibly abandoned. Inasmuch as I had time to adjust my public comments before that meeting was to have begun, I found the relevant pages of that book regarding point of order and its application, regarding call for the order of the day and its application, new business and its privileges and responsibilities, and an explanation of what the minutes are to represent. I attached the appropriate pages to the copy of the public comments as distributed to Board members that evening, and referenced each of those items by specific page numbers. I would gladly share the title of that book with you now. It is The Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules. Its author is Nancy Sylvester, your trainer for the evening. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Nancy Sylvester. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight. It's a pleasure to have you, and we're looking forward to you imparting some hopefully very helpful tools.
Hopefully.
I'm sure.
It helps us a lot.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Please go ahead and begin your introduction.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Sylvester. I have a master's degree in communication from the University of Michigan and am professor emeritus of speech at Rock Valley College, where I taught for 31 years. I have been a practicing professional parliamentarian since 1980. I am a professional registered parliamentarian, a certified professional parliamentarian, and a certified teacher of parliamentary procedure, making me one of only approximately 50 people in the country with my level of designations. I have served as the national parliamentarian for my professional organization, the National Association of Parliamentarians, 2 times, thus serving as the parliamentarian's parliamentarian. I have conducted board training to various organizations throughout the United States since 1995. He had just mentioned that I am the author of the book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules, and another book, The Gorilla's Guide to Robert's Rules. You should each have a handout, and on the first page of that handout, it gives you the subjects that we're going to be covering today. And as you see on that first page, we're going to look at board basics, at board governing documents, the fiduciary duty, board staff relationship, the purposes of parliamentary procedure, quorum, agenda, processing a motion, a concept called proceedings of motions, meaning of vote, script of a motion, meeting minutes, and basic characteristics of a motion. We're going to be talking today about two different subjects, boardsmanship and parliamentary procedure. When we think of boardsmanship, let me go back for just a moment. When we think of boardsmanship, I want you to realize that I believe, from my experience, that boardmanship in this country is much like parenting. We assume that if you know how to become one, you know how to be a good one. And if you think that's true about parenting, try going to a grocery store on Saturday morning and you won't believe that anymore. And to not do board training because we assume because you are one, you know exactly how to be one. And so tonight is about helping you understand boardsmanship and parliamentary procedure. So let's begin with board basics. First of all, the board exists to represent, we're then going to talk about board governing documents and fiduciary duty. Board staff relationship. Your job as a board member is to represent the organization. And the organization is who you are there representing throughout that meeting. So who the ownership of the organization is who you're representing. Who's the ownership of the library? I would offer to you that the ownership of the library are the people in the community who use the library, or you might define it as the people in the community who are taxpayers paying for the library, the taxes that the library uses. The board has the authority to direct the organization, and here's the caveat, only when acting as a group. So if you are off by yourself somewhere and someone comes up to you and starts talking to you, you are speaking as an individual person. You are not speaking on behalf of the board. So you can't make any decisions because you are only speaking as an individual, not in a board meeting acting as a group. The focus of the board should be on values. Base your strategic plan on values. Base your policy on values. The job of the board is to oversee the library director. You hire, you define the duties, you do a performance evaluation. You must follow the rules that are set by government, that are set by the ownership, and that are set by the board. So those three sets of rules, those three rules set by those three entities, you must follow.
Nancy, I have a question if I can.
Yes,
It's Jason Trumpo, the Vice President of the Board. So when you say that only, when you're talking out by yourself and you're, at that point, you're an individual. So if we have, let's say, a representative, or we choose to have somebody, let's say, make comments to the press on behalf of the board, we would all have to agree to those comments being public first, or how does that work?
that is the only way that you can speak on behalf of the board. If you go to the board and you say, I'm going to do this presentation, you know, and you get a motion from them to approve what you would say on behalf of the board, because otherwise you're just an individual speaking, not speaking on behalf of the board. So it has to have been something that the board has already agreed to.
Now, you just said voted, so would that mean that we would have to, like, if, let's say a journalist called and asked for a statement today, we would have to wait till our next meeting to then vote on that, or what would be the proper procedure on
Unless
that?
you had already voted on that at a recent previous meeting.
Got it, so if somebody would call, then we would have to then get either consensus or a vote, and then we would have to all agree before it goes out.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
you would just be representing your
Because
own.
you do not, as a board member, you have no authority by yourself. You only have authority when you're sitting in that room with the rest of the group at a meeting with a quorum present. Yes.
Okay, does that also go for if the executive director, if she makes a statement, should we also approve that as a board? Because that's on behalf of the library, so there should be no statements without the
Well,
board approving them?
but it's according to, if she says it's on behalf of the board, she better have gotten you all to agree with it first. But she's the library director. She's speaking from a different position than you are. She is the only library director that you have, I assume. And
Correct.
so she would be speaking on behalf of her perspective. But if she's asked, what does the board think of this? Then is when she would have to, you probably should do a good little dance and stay out of that. A two-shoe wouldn't hurt. But you need to be careful that because the director can speak as the director. You just can't speak as the board. Okay?
I have a question.
Okay.
Just a quick one, very quick. So therefore, if we have board members who are speaking to the press, they should not use their title and even say as such and such officer of the board. They should just say, my opinion is.
If you are talking to the board and you do not have or talking to the press, and the board has not voted on something, on a subject that you're going to speak on, I would advise that you preface it with, I am speaking right now as one individual who has one vote on a board of 7.
And not
And
your
I'm only
particular
speaking-
position. And not your particular position, such as, say me, I'm the secretary.
The only time that I can imagine you saying I'm speaking as the secretary is if the question's about the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
You bet. You must follow the rules set by government, ownership, and the board, because the board can set rules as well. Some more board basics. And you don't have control of this because you're an elected position.
We can't hear you
But I
clearly.
feel-
Can you,
Nancy, your
Pardon me?
sound changed a little bit.
Am I too loud?
Now it's
No.
better. Now it's better. Something happened and I think it's better
There's
now.
other participants that have their mics on,
And,
and it's picking those things up.
Can everybody at home turn their mics off, please?
because it's affecting her
Except for
sound
Nancy.
quality.
Unless you're asking a question.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody got them turned off? Thank
Perfect.
you. Diversity on the board is very important because you want to a group of people who have brought all different gifts to their knowledge, their gifts, their experiences. And the more diversity you have of that, the better off the board is going to be. The board meetings should be efficient. That means that the board should not do committee work. The presiding officer facilitates the meeting and keeps it moving along. The motions are needed on board action, and social time is for after the meeting, not during the meeting. And what I would like to talk about now is a concept that's referred to as the role of the board. And there's a lot of problems with understanding the role of the board. And I have an activity that I'd like for you to do. Whoever's helping me with this, if you have the dowel rods, if you could pass those out to anyone. And if you're at home watching this,
Thank you.
if you've got a pencil close, try that as well. And if you would take the dowel rod, and I would like for you to put it on the tip of your finger.
Oh, God, help us.
Trying to show it to you. Right there on the tip of your finger.
Come on now. Don't let go.
You have to stand up to do this.
I was gonna say, it's not working.
You might need to move a little to balance yourself. All right? Now what I'd like for you to do is to balance that dowel rod on the tip of your finger, never taking your eyes off of the tip of your finger. So look right down there at the tip of your finger and balance that dowel rod.
I'm sorry.
Is that possible?
Without using your other hand?
Without using your other hand.
Yeah, that's what balance means. Yeah.
Bad, Roberta.
How'd you do?
Terrible. Oh, there we go. Yep, we keep dropping them.
Not very good. Okay. Let's try it again this time, but we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. I want you to balance it on the tip of your finger, but this time never taking your eyes off of the other end of the stick. So look up at the other end of the stick and balance that dowel rod.
Oh,
It's easier. It's easier.
No,
No,
I'm just uncoordinated.
And how are you doing?
It's easier.
It's
It's not
better.
perfect, but it is easier.
And you're better at it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the message. You were wondering about this crazy activity I had you do. This is the message. If you are a board member and you are constantly looking at the day-to-day operations and how we're doing and how many books we have and which kind of books we have and how many, and that's all you want to talk about, and this is the library, what's going to happen to the library?
It falls.
Yeah, it
It's
doesn't,
not going to
it
do
doesn't
well, is it?
balance.
It's not going to be successful. But if you take as a board member, if you take a step back and you look at the other end of the stick and you practice it for a little while, what happens to the library?
Stable. Yeah.
The library becomes very stable, very effective. And that is the important message of tonight. As a board member, your job is to look at the big picture. Your job is not to look at the day-to-day operations. You must look at that big picture. Looking at not out next week, next month, but a year from now, 5 years from now,
Okay.
10 years from now. Are you still having trouble hearing me?
Just for a moment, it got better.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I talking too loudly?
No.
Okay. Okay. One of 7 kids, I was graced with a loud voice.
God love you.
5 brothers. Okay. So the thing that I want you to remember is that the role of the board is not day to day. The role of the board is the big picture. So let's talk about that a little bit. The board has 2 roles, governance role and a support role. In your governance role, in essence, you're the boss of certain things, the big picture. You're there to protect the public interest, to make sure that we are doing the things that's keeping in mind what's best for the public. You select, oversee, and review the library director. But you do not micromanage. In your support role, and this is all of this material that I'm giving you, you're going to find it in your handout, except this part. You're right. Some of you are taking notes. Go on and take notes during this because I don't have a lot of this in your handout. I added it afterwards. The support role, you bring in contacts and clouds who can help you with things that the library's doing. You provide skills that you have. You may have some special skills that the library needs, and you bring them to the board meetings. You're an ambassador for the library, to the community, supporting the library. Now, the problem is you have to balance both of those roles. You have to ask the tough questions. You also have to be the cheerleader. Those are two roles that are almost diametrically opposed.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hard to do both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your challenge. That's what you need to do. You need to ask the tough questions and at the right time be the cheerleader. Where does the role of the board end and the role of the staff begin? I found in your bylaws, now I know it's no surprise to you that as a parliamentarian, before I'm doing this, I've read your bylaws. I found in your bylaws, it's, you don't need to go to it. I'm going to read to you the pertinent part that I want you to be, that I want to play up on. And it's under Article 8, Duties of the Officers. It's letter G as in go, girl, go, or something like that. Under the description of your executive director. And I'd like for you to listen because there's some very, very, very important messages in this description. The board shall appoint an executive director who has the technical expert. So you bring that person in as a technical expert because you aren't. You're a citizen from the community. You're not a technical expert in libraries. Will have full responsibility for services, programs, book selection, and personnel management. The executive director shall attend all board meetings, including all executive sessions, unless specifically excluded as advisor to the board on professional library matters and shall be responsible for recommending policies and for bringing to the attention of the board the desirability of formulating policies. The key that I want you to get is full responsibility for services, programs, book selection, and personnel management. So that means that you don't have to worry about that as a board member. You don't have to worry about being the technical expert. You're not responsible for what services the library will have or won't have, or what the programs will be, or which books will be in the library, or managing the library staff. Because your bylaws and all of the principles of parliamentary law and of boardsmanship say that that's the role of your staff, particularly of your executive director. Any questions on board basics before we move into some other areas there?
So you hit on a very valid point. We're in the middle of rewriting our bylaws, so this is actually great that you say that. But I do have a question in regards to like personnel matters. So if I understand the executive director.
You didn't tell me who you are. Are you a board member?
Yeah, there's only board members.
That's
I
all I
believe,
needed to know.
So
Unless you want to tell me your first name so I can call you.
I'm Jason Trunco.
Jason, okay.
Yes, so I guess my question is, if there's an issue with personnel that goes on and it gets brought to the board, once it's brought to the board, then is the full board involved in that decision, or is it still just Valerie's decision or the executive director's decision?
It's just your executive director's decision. Now, you may decide, let's say it's a serious thing. You may decide to go into executive session, have Valerie there, share with Valerie what you have heard, and then talk through. But Valerie has the final decision. Make
Sounds
sense?
good to me. Yeah, no, sounds good to me.
Okay. Your job is governance. Her job is management. She manages the library and she manages the staff.
Excuse me, you're saying governance. I always thought of it as oversight. Similar, but not the same?
I think your view of oversight and my view of what governance is about the same thing.
Okay.
It's high level.
Yes.
Yes. It's that other end of the stick.
Yes, thank you.
So yes,
Now,
Nancy, I have a question
I will point
too.
out to you, in this activity that we did with the sticks tonight, what I have given you is a socially acceptable way to kindly say something to another board member. If a board member starts talking in a meeting about hiring a staff person or the staff person this or the staff person that, what you might do is just lean over and say to them, in which end of the stick are you looking at?
Ah.
And then it helps each other without the world knowing what you're saying, meaning.
But
it helps because we all need reminded.
That was going to be my question, Nancy. This is Becky. I was going to say that, in the past we have had issues with, things like that where, how many, even to the point where, there's been lists requested of staff names and hiring dates and how long they've worked at the library and things like that have been requested by trustees. in the past. And so if something like that were to happen again, I would just refer to this exercise possibly, and then hopefully that would remind people that that's not what we're here to do. But if it
Who's
didn't,
the chairman of the board?
I am.
Who's I am?
Becky.
Becky.
Yep.
Becky, if you can help with that, I think that yes, this activity is helpful. I hope it's helpful to you. And you can use that information to move forward. But you've got to remember, yours is the high level. Yours is not the day-to-day. You're right.
Okay. Do you have any advice to me then if I did remind someone of that and they still didn't stop? Would you have any advice on how to handle that?
Doing what? Going to the executive director and telling her things?
Yes, correct. Or asking for things that, are not a trustee's role.
That a normal any other ordinary library client or customer would have the right to ask?
Well, I guess
what
we're talking about is what the role of the board is. So if something that is not the role of the board were brought to the director and, I reminded them that's not our role, it's the director's role, and they still persisted in that, then do you have any recommendations on how to handle it after we've already reminded them?
I would go into executive session and have a discussion about it with all the board members there.
What if it's not during a meeting, if it's in between meetings?
At the next meeting, I would go into it. I would talk to them first of all.
Sure.
But if you don't think you're getting anywhere, or if they keep doing it, then I would indicate to them, I'm going to be going into asking for us to go into executive session, and I'm going to bring this up with the whole board.
Thank you.
Nancy, follow-up question. Nancy, a follow-up question is Jason Franco again.
Yes,
so
Jason.
We get a little bit into a slippery slope there that I have a question on. So there are topics that get brought to the board that we have to vote on and things of that nature. And
like what?
I mean, there's a lot of things we vote on throughout. I mean, there could be bills that we have to vote on and we have questions on, and we want to make sure before we vote on something that we have all the details. So as a trustee, you're allowed to go ask those questions and ask for the supporting documentation and everything, because we're going to vote on those things based on the information that we have, correct?
That is correct, but I would recommend that you all get in the habit of going through your board chair so that while she's trying to run the library, she doesn't get 5 calls from each of you or multiple calls from each of the 7 board members. Does that make sense?
So you're saying, well, it does and it doesn't because of how things have gone on this board for the last few years, that the chair hasn't always brought the needs of all the trustees onto agendas and things of that nature. So we want to be careful with, that's the problem, is if we just go to one person, then it's one person to make that right call and right decision. And our bylaws, are written in such a way that if, let's say I was the president and I didn't bring things that other board members are asking to the executive director to be put on the agenda or to get things that I need to vote, well, there's nothing in our bylaws that says that I can be removed as president. I could just continue to do that for, let's say, the next 2 years. So that's where the concern comes in on that. Like, if I have a question on a bill, I should be able to go to my executive director and ask a question on that so I can vote. It's my vote, so I have to make sure I'm comfortable with that vote.
If you're asking, I understand that. All I'm saying is if you're asking for information and if you're all going to or asking for the same kind of information, but because we're answering a more specific question with some general things, because that's what I have to do. But if you feel like, let's say you feel like you'd like to go to the executive director and ask them, you might then call the chair and say, I'd like to go to the executive director and ask for some information on this, this, and this. Do you have any problem with that? Or is anybody else asking for that?
So we first have to go to the chair to go to the executive
No,
director?
absolutely not.
No, that doesn't make sense.
That's not, yeah,
It's
that's not.
according to what you're, no, but I'm trying to say that you should be respectful of the executive director's time so that all 7 of you don't go individually.
Okay, but it's not required, or by law, we don't have to go to the
No,
chair
it is
first.
not required by law. It is considered good practice that if you're going to go and ask for, and not if you're going to go, I need some information on such and such. But if it's something that's going to take her a long time to go and research and get to you, then it should go through the board chair. If you're asking her to go do hours of research and come back to you with an answer on something, that should go through the board chair.
Then how do you
And then,
evaluate,
Then what?
then how do you evaluate that type of situation, Nancy, in terms of if someone presents an actual question or concern regarding paychecks, how do you go about that? What is your direction?
Who presents a concern about paychecks?
When we go through the actual checks that we review, we have questions and concerns if something is not attached or if something is not explicit.
Okay. And you have to make a decision based on some information you don't have,
Correct.
okay? You can go to the director, but I think that you all need to realize that if you're all going to the director for a bunch of different, for the same thing, that it can be a problem. Where if you went to the, if you just went and said to the exec, or maybe sent to me, you all need to decide exactly how you need to do this. But you need to make sure that you're not taking constant time of the executive director with asking her to do all kinds of research for you. That's all I'm trying to say.
So Nancy, this is Valerie, and then we have another trustee who has a question, but what I have been doing, and this seems to work well for my board, is if I get a question from one trustee, I send the answer to all trustees.
Oh,
So that
perfect.
everyone knows what's been asked, so then we don't get the same questions over again. And I think
Valerie,
that
if you're
seems to
willing to
work
do
well.
that, you're doing great.
And then we have another question here in the room.
Yes, I was going to say that she already does that, but I feel to be above board and transparent, we should probably email our questions to our director and possibly CC the chairman so that they both know what's being asked.
I think that's a great idea.
so if you do that though, how does the rest of the board know that that's been asked?
Well, the other thing you all, and this is something I think you should talk about at a board meeting, because if you might decide, if we're going to ask the executive director a question, we're going to copy all of the other board members. That's something that you all could discuss and decide how you would want to do that, so that everybody gets the answer.
And just to answer related to OMA, you can ask one question to everyone. The problem with the Open Meetings Act is if you start to engage in discussion with
It's
everyone.
open meetings issues.
So what I've
Yes.
been typically doing is if I get a question, like I said, and I email everyone, but I blind copy everyone, then we don't engage in the concurrent discussion that would violate OMA. So that seems again to be working, but we do have to be mindful of not engaging, at least the board not engaging as a group outside of a meeting.
Absolutely, thank you for that reminder.
But then again, if it is emailed, it's transparent. Where if somebody talks, it's not transparent. This way,
That's
it's
correct.
emailed, it can be proven, this is what was asked, this was the answer, no problems.
Excuse me,
And if
can
she
you hear
has the
me?
habit of answering to all of you, that's absolutely perfect. Any other questions or comments on this?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi, this is trustee Derblick. I have two questions regarding the information that we request of our director. that varies, and actually it's based upon situations that arise. And there have been numerous situations that occurred, and in order to understand exactly what transpired, or before we can even make a decision, we need to request information of the director. That is really the reason why any trustee would go to her. We have issues on this board in many different arenas, mostly because we do not utilize a board meeting to have an agenda item for open discussion and then to vote. So there's information going around that we are all not privy to. So what I do in many cases is I will email the director information that I need about something that I found out occurred. And that's how I'm able to understand the situation and then respond accurately. And then secondly, what I want to mention, when I've been on this board for many years, for the past 2 years, I was president, and it was the most volatile board. And I used our bylaws and the statutes to move forward, which weren't really acceptable. So we had a lot of controversy and chaos. But before I became president for almost 6 years, the only way that I could receive any information, and this, again, remember, my information was requested based on there were errors in our procedures or there were problems with what we were doing, and I needed information in order to understand better what was occurring and then make a decision. The director at that time refused to give me any information. I had to FOIA any information I needed as an elected trustee to understand the situation and then be able to vote. So this library has gone through quite a bit. So I am concerned when you say that we need to go through the president and what have you, because again, she determines what she thinks is important and what is not important. And that's where we have issues. So I will admit, I will not go through the president for permission. I will not abuse the director, but when I need pertinent information, I can only request it and expect to receive it. And that's pretty much my position.
Well, all I can do is to give you the information, and you all have to use your conscience and decide what, how you're going to handle it. But I just want you to, I think being respectful of the director's time is important. That's all I'm saying. And I know you do too, but, everybody does, but still. Okay. And I think the idea that the director's answering the question back to everybody is a great idea. Again.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
We have one more question, Nancy.
Okay.
Nancy, this is Roberto Botello. My question is in regards to if a decision is made by the executive director, does the board have the ability to overturn the decisions made by the executive director? And if so, at what point?
You each have to stay in your own lane. Your lane is governance. Her lane is management. If it's what book to buy, the board can't overturn that. In your bylaws, it says you can't. That section I read to you answers that question, that you can't. You can't overturn because it says has full responsibility for book selection. So if you don't want her to do, if you want to tell her not to buy a book for the library, and she buys a book and you want to overturn that, you cannot do that. Does that answer the question?
Yes. I'll extend a follow-up. With regards to personnel matters, does the board override? Does the board have the ability to override those type of decisions?
No. Go back to that bylaws section, and even if you took out this verbiage when you did the revision of the bylaws, which I would not recommend that you do, but even if you did, it still exists because this is based upon state statutes and the role of each of them. But you said if it was a personnel issue, is that what your question was?
Yes.
It says full responsibility for services, programs, book selection, and personnel management. Can't go over her. You can tell her what you think in a nice, kind way, but it's her decision. You hired her for that decision. You hired her for her management skills, and you're there for your governance skills.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Nancy, can I just interject with another follow-up question to Trustee Botello's question?
But the only yes, you can, and I'm going to take that. But the problem is, I need to get through all of the presentation, or we're not going to get finished, and I'm concerned about that. So, Carolyn, go ahead.
I'll be quick and concise. Yes, regarding personnel, I understand that it is the director's responsibility to hire. There was a recent situation, though, that actually was a monetary decision, something that is not included in our bylaws, and it occurred at what I would say an inopportune time, but the board was not made aware of this decision. And as trustees, our fiduciary responsibility is the financials of this entire library. That's our oversight. So when there's going to be a monetary financial decision made that is out of the ordinary, should the board be apprised of it?
Well, first of all, was it within budget?
Actually,
if it wasn't outside
it was
of the
not,
budget.
It was not included in the budget. No, it was not an item that was approved in the budget. Things occur, and that's a good point. And in my opinion, when things occur that were not approved by the budget, I would think that's a red flag, and it should be brought to the board for discussion and then a decision made. But that's my opinion.
But again, it's according to if it is fitting in these areas that exist there. If it's in programs, services, all of that, you set an outline budget, the overlying budget, and the director needs to stay within that. Or come and plead with you for a change.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that. When there's a difference, there should be a discussion because of a change that occur or that will occur or can occur. Okay. Thank you. I won't belabor.
If the executive director makes a decision that she thinks, oh my God, I hope the board will support this, I would strongly recommend that she go out and talk to each one of you, or talk to you at a board meeting in executive session about it, so that you can get on board with her on it and understand it and have some ways to answer those questions when people ask you. So that's something I would encourage the executive director to do.
Thank you.
You bet. Let's go to page 3 of your handout, and we're looking at the board governing documents. And I want to point out something, first of all. These are your governing documents, and they are in the order of their, I'll explain. They're in a priority order as they're listed here. The very top, and the federal government always gets these, the very top are federal laws like the IRS code. Then comes state statutes. And I'm not sure if your library has an articles of incorporation. That's usually for nonprofit organizations, so I don't know if you've got one or not. But then comes bylaws and your standing rules or policies and procedures and your parliamentary authority. So if something is in your parliamentary authority and it conflicts with something that's in your bylaws, then your bylaws trump it because they are a higher governing document, higher level governing document. So that's what I mean by this is in a level. Nothing below state statutes can conflict with federal law. You like that, huh? So this is the order, and you want to make sure that you aren't saying, well, it's in our bylaws, yeah, but it's also in state statutes that you can't do it. So that's what I'm saying. You need to be very careful and make sure you understand that order of rules. Any questions on that page?
Actually, that was page 4.
If you look in the bottom right corner of our document, it says a different page
okay.
number just because
Sorry.
of our cover page.
We have
I'm
two
sorry.
page
I won't go
numbers.
by page numbers.
We have
Let's
two
go to
different
the
page
It
numbers.
says fiduciary duty.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. And let's talk about your fiduciary duty. As a board member, you have fiduciary duty. There's a business judgment rule that says if you make a decision in which you were well informed, you acted in good faith, and you acted in the best interest of the organization, then that decision will be accorded a high degree of respect if you're taken to court. So you want to make sure that your decisions are well informed, in good faith, and the best interest of the organization. Now let's talk about the different headings there. You have three, as a board member, you have 3 legal duties. The duty of loyalty, which is in the best interest of the organization, the duty of care, and the duty of obedience, fidelity of purpose. You have to be obedient to the purposes that are in the high-level governing documents. Let's talk about each of those. The duty of loyalty. You cannot compete. You must always act in the best interest of the library. Avoid a conflict of interest. Do not use your authority to advance something personal for yourself. Do not use your board authority to advance something personal for yourself. You may not take away from the corporation's opportunities. If the library has a chance to do a presentation on a particular subject and they might make some money on it, you can't then go out and do a presentation or sponsor a presentation on that subject and take away from that opportunity. And the duty against self-dealing. The duty against, I'll help myself with this one. I'll take care of myself with this one. Then comes the duty of care. You need to exercise independent judgment. You need to be diligent in carrying out your responsibilities. You need to attend their meetings regularly, participate in decisions, and there's a list of things that you must refrain from. Grossly negligent conduct, reckless conduct, intentional misconduct, and knowing violation of the law. And I just realized I've been slipping through the, no, I haven't been, so ignore me. Just a minute, I'm going to go back up. Bear with me. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. The duty of obedience, and in your handout. It's also called the duty of fidelity of purpose, you staying faithful to the stated purpose of the library. Are all of the activities that you all are supporting in line with the purpose of the library? As a nonprofit, you must stick with your designated purpose. And you're pretty familiar with that purpose. I have a feeling that you are. Under the duty of obedience, those laws must be followed: withholding tax requirements, civil rights laws, state solicitation, and equal rights laws. Any questions on your fiduciary duty? As I said in the beginning, if you use your fiduciary duty and you make decisions that are informed, that are in good faith, and that are in the best interest of the organizations, and you get sued, you're most likely going to win, because you are falling within your fiduciary duty. The next area I'd like to talk about is extremely important. It is the board-staff relationship. And I find when I do board training, as I said, I've been doing this since 1995, and what I have found in doing board training is that there isn't a lot of good understanding about, in good governance, what the flow of how that flow of information goes. So the library director and the board, the two of you, more than two, but that two entities make up the leadership team of the organization. There are some things about the leaders that I want to share with you. They come from a book by a man named Daniel Goleman, and it's called Primary Leadership. In that book, he says, leaders set the mood of the organization. 50 to 70% of how people view or perceive their organization's climate can be traced to the actions of the leaders. That's you all on this call, on this Zoom. The more cooperatively the leaders work together, the better the organization's business results. So the more effective you are as a library. And the climate, how people feel about working there, can account for 20 to 30% an increase in business performance. So you set a climate at that library where people want to come to work. And this research says that that can account for 20 to 30% of your business performance. I think those numbers tell you that those are very, very important. Mm-hmm. Now look at that hourglass under the heading board-staff relationship. Notice at the widest portion of the top, we have, and by the way, you know an hourglass goes both ways. This hourglass does too.
Nancy, can I remind you to please advance your
Yes.
slideshow?
Oh, I don't have any of this on the slideshow. That's why. I made that mistake earlier. That's why I did that.
Well, I think
Went
we've
back.
already done this part, the fiduciary responsibilities.
I'm not on the, I'm on a page that says board staff relationship.
Yes, but on your slideshow, it says fiduciary responsibility. I think we've
No,
already.
but I don't
okay.
have anything for
Okay,
that.
you don't have this. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
I know, I'm
Thank you
sorry
for
too.
asking.
The board staff relationship You notice at the top of the hourglass, the widest part is the Board of Trustees. Then you come in to your board president. And then we go through that very thin part, and outside of that is the executive director and then the staff. What this hourglass tells you is that as a Board of Trustee member, you cannot go to a staff member and tell them what you want them to do, because you have to first of all talk to the president, who will then talk to the executive director, who then will talk to the staff person. Just like a staff person needs to go first to the executive director, who then goes to the president, who then goes to the Board of Trustees. This is crucial, because if you have board members telling staff what to do and staff sneaking behind the board's back, or behind the organization's back, and talking to the Board of Trustees and complaining to them, you will not have an effective, there's no effective governance in that situation. Any questions on this? As I said, this is very, very important, this hourglass. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Nancy, this is Valerie, and I do just want to
Yes.
reiterate, just from the beginning of the training, is that if there are things that are brought to my attention from any board member, I do try to share them with the rest of the board. So I appreciate, even if it doesn't go directly through the president, the idea of what you're talking about makes sense, where there is a channel of communication, where the board is involved, and I am involved as executive director, as the conduit between the board and the staff. I believe that's the most important part, right?
I agree with you, but the president is the one who, if anybody is going to be talking to the executive director about something that the board has decided, let's say that they're going to tell you you shouldn't be doing ABC anymore. That should come from the president. The board should make that decision and direct the president to talk to you about that. So this is truly a well-proven, over many years, way of looking at the way in which the communication should go within the organization. Does that make sense to everyone?
Do you have any advice for when that is not the way communications go, as far as, like, for example, board decisions are made at a board meeting, right? Generally speaking.
Right.
So that, if the board has voted, that is where I get my direction as the director, correct?
Correct, but it's the president's job to talk through that with you and to share that. But if you were sitting in the board meeting, you know it already. So, you know, you're getting it already from the whole board, if it's something that's decided in open session. Yes.
And if it's decided in closed session, as our bylaws say, I'm typically in the meeting unless I am specifically excluded, but I still
Right.
would get direction from the board as a whole, correct?
And the fact that you're in that meeting gives you the opportunity to say, are you saying this? Are you saying that?
Yes.
How should I do this? How should I do that? You have this wonderful opportunity to clarify what they mean and make sure that you're understanding what they're trying to tell you. Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
thank you.
Nancy, can I just interject a quick statement? This is a very important comment that you're making and explaining. I think our issue as a board is, for quite some time now, we're having individual trustees bring up situations or issues, or however you want to describe it, individually to the director, and decisions are being made outside of our board meetings. I think that's a real factor that we need to address. I think the board needs to understand decisions are board decisions and they shouldn't be an individual trustee. And we need to get back to the process of having agenda items that bring up these topics. And then Valerie will be part of a full board discussion and a decision. I think that would help us going forward because we're falling short in that area.
Well, I'll just point out that there's nowhere here, your board of trustees is at the top. The third one down is the executive director. In between them, in that little thin area there, is the president. So it shouldn't be going from the board members to the executive director. It should be, unless it's cold in the kids' room or something like that. And that shouldn't go to the executive director, that should go to your maintenance person or whatever.
Rich, yes.
That's something you do even as a patron of the library. So Carolyn, I'm agreeing with you that this is how the communication should go. And if a staff member comes to you and complains to you about the executive director, your first question is, have you talked to the executive director about that?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Unless it's a illegal or a harassment issue.
Right, yeah,
Then-
I understand.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Think of that hourglass. Because you sure don't want staff coming to you and talking to you about issues, right? About
Well,
everything.
we've had that issue. We've had that issue and hopefully it's resolved now, but it has been a problem that we've been dealing with, but I think it's getting better.
Well, here's the way you can solve it. If that staff member comes to you and says something, you wouldn't do it this rudely, but it's talk to the hand because I'm not listening. I am not the person that you should be talking to. It is not appropriate. If a staff member came to me and I was on your board and they were complaining about something that was something that should be going to the executive director first, which is almost everything, except sexual or any kind of abuse. But what I would say to them is, my responsibility as a board member does not include talking directly to the staff about staff issues. That is something you need to go to the executive director first, and it needs to go through the proper channels. So I'm sorry, I will not discuss this with you, and I need to go now. You've got to help them understand that they're not going through the right channel, because they're not. Any questions about that? Because this hourglass is very, very important.
Nancy, this is Valerie again. On the other side of that, in the most respectful way, if I myself or a staff member have a question about whether a direction is coming from a trustee or versus the full board, would you advise that we just ask the question, is this coming from the full board? Is that and that, I guess that
I don't
question
think
is,
I think that kind of but you know if it was coming from the board unless it was done in executive session, because your minutes are public, right?
Mm-hmm.
correct, yes.
Yeah.
So I can go and find out if the board, I don't have to ask you.
Thank you.
And if you didn't go into an executive session, I know, and I can't find it in the minutes, I know you didn't get it from the board. See what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
So are you trying to get at, Valerie, this is Becky, Nancy, Valerie, are you trying to get at then if you're given a directive that you aren't sure is from the board or from a trustee? So then hypothetically, you get a directive for whatever. You go back and check and you find that it is not a directive from the entire board, and now you're wondering, what should you do?
Yes, the most respectful way.
Talk
and
to
that
the
might-
board chair.
Talk to the board chair.
Valerie, your direct contact notice is the president of the board. So you could go to the board chair or call the board chair and say, was this so-and-so talked to me about this? Was this a decision of the board? That would be very appropriate for you to. Or if one of your staff members comes to you and says, so-and-so said that that they're gonna maybe, you can call the president and say, was this a board decision and did I miss it?
Because as you said, there are some things that are discussed in executive session that the staff may not be privy to, for example. So there may be some things that were board directives, and if I'm not here, for example, something comes up. I'm just trying to find the best way, and it might be something that we discuss collectively with myself and the board, just for the best way to most respectfully ask this question. That's all I'm trying to get to, a respectful way.
And what I'm trying to get to is avoid ever allowing staff to go to a board of trustees about something that should go through the middle.
Okay.
And every one of you as board of trustees have control over that. At least for yourself, you have control over that. Because you don't want to get in the habit of everything going from the board to the staff, the board to the staff. It is not fair to your executive director, and it is not fair to your president who's supposed to be in charge of the board. Okay. Are we ready to move?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to,
So we're going back to previous stuff?
you had said at one point taking a short break. Do we need, we're going until
8:30?
8:30, so we
8:40?
could wait a little while, right?
Yeah, we can wait a little bit,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned.
Let me get way past to where I want to be here, and I'm sorry. I've been messing around. Okay, we've talked about those board subjects, and now we're going to talk about, we talked about boardsmanship, now we're going to talk about parliamentary procedure.
Thank
And if
you.
you'll go to, pardon me?
I said thank you. Page 7 is the big number, page 6 is the little number. So 6 would probably be your
That's
page.
the answer. Thank you
No
very
problem.
much.
Obliged to help.
Okay. The purposes of parliamentary procedure are basically threefold. One, I'm sorry, let me give you the overall subjects first, then we'll talk about the purposes. We're going to talk about the purposes of parliamentary procedure. I want to make sure you understand the proper definition of a quorum, because I find a lot of people don't. We're going to look at agenda. We're going to look at the processing of a motion. There are 6 steps in the processing of a motion, and I'm going to make sure that you understand those 6 steps because it's very important to an effective meeting. We're going to look at a concept called precedence of motions. That's pronounced precedence in the parliamentary world, not precedence. We're going to look at meaning of votes. I have a sample script for a motion in here. And we're going to talk about meeting minutes. And then I'm going to share with you a cheat sheet for you during meetings that's called the basic characteristics of a motion. So let's now talk about parliamentary procedure. And the bullet that you, being book people, want to make sure that you
Can't
are
see
looking
it.
at.
It's the one
Oh,
on,
Robert's rules?
yeah.
Okay.
But I want to tell you, notice it's white covered, gold trim. Right underneath this oval in the middle there, it says 12th edition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at a Robert that isn't, that's paperback, that isn't white, then you're looking at the wrong one. And the hardcover of this edition, of the 12th edition, is blue. So it needs to be the 12th edition because the bylaws say that you are following the current edition of Roberts. I have a collection of Roberts that are still in his first and second edition.
Oh, good.
And there's over 85 books of those. So this is it. This is the only one that you should be looking at in modern day time to come up with an answer to your question. The 12th edition. There's two other books, and I mentioned them earlier and showed you. One is my Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules, and the other is The Gorilla's Guide to Robert's Rules. Did somebody have a question? I heard a voice.
No.
No, it was a cough.
Oh, okay. The purpose of parliamentary procedure. I always like to start with that because those who don't like parliamentary procedure think that there's all kinds of negative purposes. But the true purpose is, number one, to expedite business. If you follow parliamentary procedure properly, your business meetings should be shorter. And having attended literally thousands of meetings in my years as a professional parliamentarian, I can tell you that that is exactly what happens. You expedite business. And in our litigious, happy society, you assure legality. If you do something and you haven't followed proper parliamentary procedure and somebody doesn't like what you did, you're opening yourself and the organization up to a lawsuit. So, there are the craziest lawsuits having to do with parliamentary procedure. It's just unbelievable. And then protect the rights of the minority. One of the purposes of parliamentary procedure is to protect the rights of the minority. And the reason that I personally think that that is so very important is because almost every majority idea we've ever had started as a minority point of view. If you think about it, almost everything that's a major idea that the majority believe started as a minority point of view. So we have to protect the rights of that minority point of view. Now, one of the terms that's used and that I find a lot of people do not understand is the term quorum. A quorum is the number of voting members. So if you have I don't think you do, but if you had non-voting members, they don't count in counting the number of people or the number of people present. So it's the number of voting members who must be present for business to be transacted legally. And because of the Open Meetings Act, you all are real familiar with this one. So I don't have to kind of talk about that too much, I don't think. Any questions on quorum? It's voting members present. And it's not at the beginning of the meeting and then you can leave and it doesn't matter. It's anytime you're conducting business in the meeting. Think of it as warm bodies, not votes. So it's warm bodies in the room, not necessarily votes in the room. So if you have a membership of 7 and your quorum needed is a majority, that would be 4, and you have a vote, and there were 2 yes, 1 no, and 1 person abstained, do you have a quorum?
Yes.
No.
Yes, because 2 people were there to vote yes, 1 was there to vote no, and 1 was there to abstain. So you have 4 people there, and that's what you needed was 4 members present. I do find frequently that people will say, well, I looked in the minutes and it said that the vote was 2-1 and their quorum is a 4, and so that has to be an illegal. No, No, somebody may have abstained. And that's one of the reasons why many times the secretary, when you're taking the minutes, one of the things that you might want to do is always put, if somebody's there, is present and chooses to abstain, and put there was one abstention. And then that way, later, they go back and they see that there were 4 people there. Okay. Now let's talk about the agenda. The agenda, the standard order of the agenda is, first of all, the approval of the minutes. Second, are reports from officers, your boards, your standing committees, and then reports from your special committees. After that, we have special orders, and think of those, you won't see that very often, but think of those as orders from your bylaws. So if your bylaws say at the first meeting in November, you will do X, Y, Z, then X, Y, Z, that's where it goes on that agenda. Then comes unfinished business. It is not old business. Old business is misleading. Oh, we talked about this a couple months ago, so I'm going to bring this up under old business. No. It's unfinished business. That means business that you started at the previous meeting and didn't finish.
So in other words, we should change our terminology on our agenda and make sure it says unfinished business?
I definitely would, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because people, like I said, then if you say, oh, well, we talked about this a long time ago. No, it's, you only get this, see, well, this is all about priority. You only get this higher priority of unfinished business if it was started at the previous one and not finished.
Mm-hmm.
Then it gets a higher priority.
Mm-hmm.
But if you finished it, it comes in as new business if you're going to bring it up again.
Well, technically, this is just my
Yes.
question. If something was voted on at a previous meeting and was approved by the majority, unless the majority says, okay, we want to revisit it, it shouldn't be revisited. Am I correct or am I wrong?
That is called a motion to reconsider.
Yes.
And you go back and you first of all decide.
Hold on, your microphone
can't
has
hear
gone
you.
out, so.
You can't hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. The reconsider is you have to make a motion to reconsider the motion to do such and such.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a vote on whether or not to reconsider it. Otherwise, one person who has a pet project could drive us all crazy at every meeting.
So this is something
I
that,
saw that.
this could be something that is not on the agenda that would be called for reconsideration?
Usually, because of the Open Meetings Act, I believe that you need to put reconsider such and such an issue on the agenda. So
Okay.
you need to notify whoever it is that you let know of the agenda in advance before the agenda goes out that you want to do the reconsider. But I'm not positive that the Open Meetings Act allows that.
From my understanding, Nancy, and this is Valerie, talking to the OMA hotline here in through Rails, which is a system in Illinois libraries.
Yes, I know Rails. I do a lot of training for them.
Perfect. I was told that things can be added, whether it's in the other section on our agenda or things of that nature, but they cannot be voted on. No action can be taken if it's not on the agenda within 48 hours of advance notice.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense, but here's when you would be taking an action. Because you would be
but
you would be reconsidering it.
reconsidering it would still lead us to take a vote, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So
That's what
therefore,
he's saying.
we're taking an action.
yeah. Actually, 2 votes. One to reconsider, and then if that passes,
Right.
then the other one to actually take the action again.
Okay,
Yeah, good point, very good point.
thank you.
Okay. So we have unfinished, not old, and then anything that we haven't, when it says new business, it doesn't mean that it's new to us ever, but it's new business at this meeting. It's not being carried over from a previous meeting. So it's new business, and that's the last thing on the agenda. And I noticed in your bylaws, you have those last 2 turned around in your agenda, in your bylaws.
How do we normally do it in our
Do
agenda?
we have other, I don't know, do we have other in the bylaws?
We do have other in the bylaws, but she's talking about that
Oh.
in our bylaws, the order is new business before unfinished.
And it should be, that should be suggested
Flip.
revisiting it
Okay.
and flipping it, okay?
If you would look in your bylaws, you can write this down so you can find them later, but it's in Article 6, Section E is in everything, number 11 and 12. And you have new business before unfinished business.
Thank you.
And the whole purpose is that if you ran out of time at the last meeting, you ought to be able to finish it first,
Right.
before you bring up something you haven't discussed at all.
Yes.
But
Hi,
that's,
Nancy, this is Umair Kadir, trustee. This agenda order, is this recommended? Is it codified by statute anywhere? Where is this coming from?
I think it's coming from you all. I don't believe it's in statute anywhere, because I've over the years looked at the statutes, and that, I think that would have stuck out. It jumped out at me. So, and usually you
No,
don't.
what I
enter-
mean is the standard that you're presenting right now. What is the
Is it
source
your
of that?
parliamentary authority?
Me
All
right-
of what I'm giving you on the screen here is in your parliament, in Robert's Rules of Order, in your
Okay.
parliamentary authority.
Does Robert's Rules, so then my second follow-up question would be, does Robert's Rules recommend this
No.
order or
Robert
require?
says that this is the proper agenda order unless your rules say otherwise. So you can keep yours like they are.
I don't say that.
You can keep it like they are and have new business before unfinished business. It was just something I wanted to point out to you.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay? Let's look at the steps in processing a motion. And this is so very important because we need to make sure that we follow these steps, and we all follow them whenever we make a motion, so we all know what those steps are. The first step in the processing of a motion is that a voting member, and it must be a voting member of the body that's meeting, makes a motion. And the reason it has to be a voting member of the body that's meeting that can make a motion is that making a motion is considered a first step in the process of voting. So you have to be a voting member. So a voting member makes a motion. Another voting member seconds that motion. The third step is that the presiding officer then states that motion, therefore formally placing it before the assembly. So I want you to think of it this way. A voting member makes a motion. Second, another voting member seconds the motion. Then the presiding officer, it's as if they go out to the person who made the motion and the person who seconded it, picked it up, and then gave it to everybody else. It no longer belongs to the maker or the seconder. It now belongs to all of you. So you cannot dispose it without all of you making a decision. Make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
go on. So presiding officer, make sure that you probably have all of your motions have to be in writing, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you have a copy then, a duplicate, and a copy is given to the president. So the presiding officer then can read right from that, and you're thinking, oh, they already heard it once just a couple of seconds ago even. But it, first of all, it helps because it helps with the detail. It helps people hearing it the second time pick out words and things that they want to understand about it. So make sure that you don't overlook this step because it's very, very important, the presiding officer stating the motion. Then the members debate the motion. This is the time when the motion is considered pending. And I tell you that because pending is a word that is used very, very frequently in Roberts. And what it means is when Roberts says such and such can happen to it when the motion is pending, what it means is when it's at step number 4. So this is where it can be amended. All kinds of things can happen to it while it is being, and all kinds of secondary motions can be applied to it. When the members are debating the motion, the first person who seeks recognition from the chair to speak is the first person who should be called on, unless the member who made the motion has not yet spoken on it. So if 2 people raise their hand and one is at the same time and one is the maker of the motion, or somebody else raises their hand and then the maker of the motion raises their hand, you still call on the maker of the motion first. The maker of the motion has the right to explain their motion and to give their reasons for it. If you've got a few people out there, you're the chair and you've got to call on people in the proper order, and you've got several people out there who want to speak. If any one of them has not yet spoken on it and the others have, then you call on the person who's not yet spoken. It's that old polite thing that you shouldn't call on somebody a second time until everybody who wishes to speak a first time has had the chance to do so. In the case where the chair knows the opinion or asks the opinion, it is a very good idea during debate to alternate between those speaking in favor and those speaking against. So the first person you call on is the person who made the motion, who's going to be speaking in favor of it. And then you call on somebody who is going to speak in opposition to it. And you're thinking, how do we know? Simply say, is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition to the motion? And then you call on that person. And then you go back, anybody wishing to speak in favor. And then you call. And again, you don't call on somebody a second time till everybody's had a chance to speak a first time. There are a lot of motions, or some motions, that are improperly used during step number 4. And you'll find these in your handout, but I'd like to mention some of them to you. One of the ones I hear all the time is, I move we table this motion until the next meeting or until such and such a time. The purpose of laying it on the table is that what you are saying is that you want to put this aside, something unexpected has come up, so we need to put this motion aside, take care of that something unexpected, which is more urgent, and then we'll go back to the motion that was on the table, that we were discussing. It is not something that you can postpone to, you cannot table it to a later time. You'll find out in a little bit you can postpone it to a later time, which is a whole different motion with different rules,
Oh,
not just a different name.
so we shouldn't say table, we should say postpone. And
If you're,
I personally
if you-
find we do that more so when our agenda is quite lengthy and we are running on and on and on, and sometimes we decide, hey, it's 10 o'clock at night, let's postpone this till next month. It's not a hot topic. You're saying we should say postpone versus table.
if you're going to postpone it to a specific time, if something urgent didn't come up, that's correct. Yes. That's correct. And if people keep going on and on, there is that motion called I move we close debate. So we'll get to that later.
Good luck to that
That's
one.
you can, yeah. So during step number 4, the motion is considered pending, and you'll find pending in Roberts a lot. It'll say, when the motion is pending, such and such can happen to it. So look for, that's what it means when you read when the motion is pending. The next step is that the presiding officer puts the question to a vote, and that includes restatement of the motion.
Sorry, can we back up for a second, Nancy?
Pardon me?
Can we back up for a second?
Yes,
Thanks, sorry. So during the debate,
no problem.
now I'm forgetting what I was gonna ask.
Wait, I'll get there. There.
Oh, I think I wanted to ask, during the debate, or I guess doesn't necessarily have to be during this step, but last month at our regular board meeting, I brought up a request during the meeting, and I think I phrased it like, hold on a second.
I'm just trying to turn it off, hang on.
I think there was a thing that I brought up, and it was phrased something like, is there any opposition to limiting the amount of time each trustee speaks on this agenda item? And I think that you had talked to me about this before, right? Before the last meeting, and Valerie and I we were meeting about tonight, and this came up. And so during the meeting, I said, is there any opposition to limiting the number of minutes for each trustee to speak to 5? And someone said, yes, I object to that, because you can't do that. We can't have a vote that's not on the agenda. And I said, right. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Well, I know from what you're saying right now that that's not accurate. You can have a vote that's not on the agenda. It just can't be a vote that will cause the city to take a specific action.
Do you mean the library?
This is
The
not,
library to take an action.
I'm sorry, the library. To take a specific, this is what is called a procedural vote, and those are allowed.
Because there were some trustees that were concerned that it wasn't legal to do that, and so they abstained from voting. But
Now,
actually,
here's how I would handle that if I were in that situation. It has been suggested that we limit the discussion of this to 5 minutes. Is there any objection to limiting the discussion on this topic and this topic only to 5 minutes per person, per board member?
and then if there were no objections, that would
If there's
stand.
no objection, you'd say, hearing no objection, we have a limit of 5 minutes. Now, I'd have clarified that. Do you mean 5 minutes all in one present time or 5 minutes spread throughout? Because that's harder to keep track of. But I'd have, but
Okay,
we didn't. So then, if you do get an objection, then what you would say is the motion before you is is for us to limit on this topic to 5 minutes.
We lost you again.
We lost you. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What you would, if somebody objected, then you could just immediately go to a vote on it. The motion before you is that we limit the debate on this particular motion and only this motion to 5 minutes, one speech of 5 minutes each for each trustee. All of those in favor of limiting the time to 5 minutes per trustee, please raise your hand, or whatever. All of those opposed, please raise your hand. The motion is adopted and we are limited to 5 minutes each. Will the secretary or whoever keeps time, please watch the time and let the speaker know when their 5 minutes is up. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you.
But you're not taking an action having to do with the city. You're taking what is we call in the parliamentary world a procedural. It's how we proceed within the meeting.
And
Does that make sense to everybody?
yes,
But
Yes.
we have to do it for every single thing we're concerned about taking a little longer? Every single time we have to say that we take a vote?
No, you can adopt rules at the beginning of the meeting that say that nobody can speak longer than 5 minutes, or you can
On
say
a subject.
nobody. Yeah, or on a motion.
On a motion, yes.
Either way, on a report or on a subject, except the person giving the report, obviously. But and what I like is nobody could speak more than 3 minutes per speech and more than 2 times per motion or subject.
Nancy, is that something that the board could also consider adopting as part of bylaws and a general rule?
I wouldn't do it as part of bylaws because bylaws cannot, this is why you have to be careful what you put in your bylaws. They can't be suspended. So you all decide you need to hear more and you can't. You know, everybody unanimously would like to change that for this one meeting, but you can't. So you put those in policies and procedures, those kind of rules. But watch what you put in the bylaws because they cannot be suspended.
Thank you. I was asked
No matter
that
how great
question,
the
so I
case
wanted
is.
to share.
Thank you. Okay.
And my question, I know I'm not trying to drag this on, but it is because I'm asking a question, is what if we have a member and we say we vote on this and we all agree to a time limit and we have members who feel that rule doesn't apply to them and continues? There's nothing we can do about it.
Well, the gavel, the presiding officer should pound the gavel, and all of you have a responsibility as a board member to shut up when the gavel is tapped.
Thank you.
Nancy, this is
Yes.
Roberto Botello. Unfortunately,
Yes.
I have witnessed where board members do not adhere to that rule and they continue to speak after the gavel has been struck. Do we need a sergeant at arms to enforce that, the adherence to the rules?
And what could the
I
sergeant
would
do?
recommend that you ask your attorney if you could have a sergeant of arms and if they could be removed for not following the rules.
Thank you.
That would be the first step. But the best step would be that all of you follow the rules.
Thank
And
you.
that means all of you.
Thank you.
So Nancy, may I just
First
ask
of all,
a
if I
question?
could editorialize on that for just a quick minute. When someone is observing you, and you are being observed, you know that,
Mhm.
and you have that kind of thing happening, they lose respect for the group, I would offer to you that they first of all lose respect for the person, but second of all, they lose respect for the person, for the library board. Somebody had a question?
Yes, it's Carolyn Derbler. Nancy, in the past, as we would have a motion on the table, I tend to come to board meetings with data or information that may not be in favor with people on the other side of the issue. My purpose at a board meeting is just to bring the facts so the board members are aware of them because they don't come up in board meetings. And even more importantly, so the public is aware of all the details. And I would immediately be gavelled or silenced, or people would sing and they would talk over me. So it would become a total chaos. In those situations, I would say you do not have a right to prevent me from speaking.
You're
What you're
wrong.
saying is, so what you're saying then, they can stop me immediately for no reason, just
No,
because
wait,
they
just a
don't,
minute. They can't stop you immediately,
but they did.
especially if you've got your minutes. If you've got a thing on a minutes, you know, you can only speak 3 minutes each time.
Okay, no, we didn't have that. We didn't
I
have that.
understand that.
But I need you to I'm just bringing this out so you understand that the purpose of gaveling or the purpose of stopping me was because my view had different information. Now, if we come up with a policy or a procedure, they can limit everyone to 5 minutes. So I see what you're saying.
I really recommend, I taught speech for 31 years. I
Mhm.
know how long 5 minutes is of somebody speaking. I know what you can get into 5 minutes. I also know what you can get into 3, and I strongly recommend 3 at the most.
Well, whatever you recommend, and now I can say, yes, if it applies to everyone on the board, I'm totally in agreement. But for it to have only applied to me for so many years, that's what I was in disagreement with. So thank you for explaining that.
It's still, regardless of the time limit, I think that the topic, whatever the topic being discussed, is what the debate is about. So if we're debating
You
about,
have to, or the chair, I'm sorry.
so right, if we're debating about whether or not we want to replace the roof, someone shouldn't be then talking for 3 minutes about solar panels, because that's not what we're talking about. In that case, if they won't stop talking about solar panels when we're talking about replacing the roof, would it be appropriate to gavel them if they won't stop talking about that?
Yeah, you used a bad example.
Okay.
Well, just
Here's why. Here's why. I have solar panels only because I had to get a new roof once, and I decided as long as I was getting a new roof, everybody says to get those together. That's kind of a, never mind.
yes.
Anyway, if you could get a little more disconnected, because all you would need to say on the solar panel thing is that it's best to get it when you get to new roof.
Well, the point is that if we're debating
But
one
you're
thing
right.
and the person uses their 3 minutes to talk about something not related, that's not okay, right?
That is absolutely correct. And the chair should call them out of order and should gavel. And in any other group, you would be removed from the room if you didn't stop. But you can't unless you find out from your lawyer that you have the right, and then you get it to where it's written in the rules that way. But yeah, you're right.
Thank
If
you.
they want to talk about getting a new roof and they want to talk about siding the house, no, that's not what this motion is about.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, this is
I'm sorry,
Valerie. I know this was something we mentioned when we were preparing for this training, but I think one of the concerns that I've been asked about is just making sure that the voice of the minority is also heard if it's on topic. And do you have any advice for how to make sure that both sides are heard in the debate part of discussing a motion?
One of the things I like to do is, and I think I was going to mention this later, but I'll do it right now anyway, is alternate sides.
Yeah,
Is there anybody who wishes to speak in the affirmative on this motion? And then I write down everybody's name who wants to speak in the affirmative. I let one person speak, and then I ask if there's anybody who wishes to speak in the negative, and I get the names down there, and then I alternate between my list. Not going back to anybody, even if their hand went up a second time, not going back to them until everybody's had a chance to speak once. Here's one of the reasons that works well. Because if I say somebody would like to speak and that you should call on the maker of the motion to be the first speaker, and of course they're going to speak in favor of it, you hope. So you got that, then you ask, is there anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the motion? Then if you say anybody wishes to speak in favor, and somebody speaks. Then you ask if somebody wishes to speak in opposition, and nobody's got their hand up, it's a pretty good sign that this puppy's going to pass. So people then start putting their hands down again because they see that, oh, I guess it's going to pass with or without my comment, so I just won't make it. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on to the next step?
I think, are we maybe ready for the break now? Does anybody need a break?
Could I finish the 6 steps in processing a motion and then do it? Do you mind?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll make it quick. The presiding officer puts the question to a vote and always includes a statement of the motion. Now, if it's a long, paragraph long, you can make it just a summary of what it is, a sentence of what we're voting on. But not everybody is paying attention at every moment. So you need to make sure that they are reminded, and then they're not later going, what did we just vote on? So you make sure you remind them right before. And then the presiding officer announces the voting results. And here's what the presiding officer should announce. 3 things. First, whether the motion passed or failed. Second, the effect of the motion. And third, the next business item. So let's say it was the roof on the building.
Can't hear you.
And
Can you repeat
What?
that? Can you
Please
repeat
repeat.
the thing or my last?
that? Your last sentence we missed.
Oh, so let's say it's the roof on the building is the motion that we, new roof on the building. The chair would say there were 5 votes in favor, 2 votes against. The motion is adopted. We will be putting a new roof on the building. And the next business item is whether or not to add solar panels. See, then everybody knows, even if you were daydreaming or reading your phone or reading something on your phone or whatever, you know exactly what just happened, by how much, and where we're going next. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now would be a good time to take a break if you'd like. How long should we take? My watch says 7:32. We only have till 8:30, and I have a lot to cover.
Do we need a break? Does anyone want to skip the break?
I was going to say just to run to the bathroom, but it's unnecessary.
Maybe 5 minutes?
Okay, 5 minutes. It is
I'll
7.
start back up in 5 minutes.
All right.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about a concept called precedence of motions. And on the screen and in your handout, you see a list of 14 motions. And
Okay,
you'll notice 11 and 12 are both amendments. One is a primary amendment and one is a secondary amendment. So the primary amendment is an amendment to the main motion. A secondary amendment is an amendment to the primary amendment. What I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes has to do with only these 14 motions. And it has to do with the order in which they are listed there. So with that in mind, let me begin by talking about the concept of precedence of motions. It, as I said, applies only to these 14 motions and in the order that they are there. And what this says is that when a motion is pending, remember that's the time when we're debating it, any motion above it on this list could be made. Any motion below it on this list cannot be made. So when any one motion is pending, anything above it on the list can be made, anything below it cannot be made. Thus, precedence of motions. The best way to do this is to use an example. So the example is, I move that we purchase a computer. The motion is seconded. It is restated by the chair. Debate is begun, and one of you is thinking, we better put a price limit on that, because you know some of these guys, they'll really go too far and spend all kinds of money on it. So I'm going to move, I want to put a price limit on it. I want to amend the motion. The red one is an amendment to the blue motion to add the words, not to exceed $2,000. Now, the main motion, the blue one, is number 14. The red one is a primary amendment. It's number 12. It's above it on the list. It's in order. So I get a second on that. I restate it as the chair, I restate it. And then, after I've restated it, then we are discussing, now we're discussing not to exceed $2,000 and only not to exceed $2,000. And one of you sitting there thinking, 2,000? When was the last time you bought a decent computer? We need some other things on it and capabilities for what we're going to use it for. I move to strike 2,000 and insert the word 4,000. That is, what number on that list? Pardon me?
11.
It's number 11. It is a secondary amendment. Notice it's not amending the main motion, because that's what the red one does, the primary amendment. This is a secondary amendment. It is amending the primary amendment.
Nancy, I have a question already. Is
That's fine.
after we start the debate, can the amendment be made, the first amendment, can it be made after debate starts, or does it have to be made before the debate starts?
No, it cannot be made until the chair restates the motion and formally placing it before the assembly, and debate begins.
Okay.
And then and only then can you be making a motion while it's pending. While the motion is pending, you can make any of these other amendments, any of these other motions to it.
Okay, thank you.
Make sense?
Yes.
So in the first part of the debate, somebody may stand up and say, you guys, we need an exit, and I don't know enough to say what we need on a computer, but we need this, we need that. I would therefore move to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000. And because it's number 11 on the list, it's above number 12, which is the primary amendment, it's in order. So now we're deciding whether or not to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000. And somebody is thinking and raises their hand and says, I move that we postpone this to the next meeting. I think we all need to do some research, so I move we postpone this to the next meeting. Can I do that?
No.
Why not?
Isn't it below?
What number do you think it is?
It says, postpone is,
Number
oh no,
nine.
I'm sorry. Postpone indefinitely?
That's a motion to kill it. The one that I just used is postpone definitely. I gave it
Okay.
until the next meeting.
Okay,
So
so
that
that'd be
is
nine.
up above, it's number 9.
Mm-hmm.
So I
it can
can't
be
do
done.
that.
Thank you.
Now, you're the chair of this meeting, and you've got 4 motions in front of you. What do you do first? You pull out your hair, is that what you're
5
saying?
minutes,
Yes, pull out
5-minute
your hair.
recess.
You read the gesture, huh?
Yeah, I did. You'd be surprised what I can read after 31 years in speech classroom. Okay, I have the ladder there for a reason. We went up to the first rung of the ladder with the main motion. We went up to the second rung of the ladder with the primary amendment, strike 2,000, insert 4,000. We went up to the third rung with a secondary amendment, add not to exceed 2,000. We went to the fourth rung when we postponed to the next meeting. So now we put it aside, and the secretary makes sure you have all of these recorded in the minutes. And then we come back to the next meeting under, where would we
Unfinished.
put this?
Unfinished business.
At what on the agenda at the next meeting would we put this under?
Unfinished business.
Thank you.
Nancy,
Unfinished
quick
business.
question. That assumes that the motion to postpone passed, right?
No, right?
None of this has been voted on yet. We have 4 motions that are pending, that have not been voted on.
Are you making a,
Okay, but the motion to postpone has to be voted on first before you actually postpone.
I'm sorry, you're right. I'm sorry, I was thinking the other, thank you.
Got it.
We voted on postpone to the next meeting. Now we're at the next meeting, and we have 3 motions. Thank you. We are at the top of the ladder. We already took care of postpone definitely, because we're at the next meeting. So now we go to the secondary amendment, which is to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000. We debate that, and then we vote on it. Let's say we get a no vote. Then, Then the motion before us now, we have 2 motions on the floor. One is to add to the main motion not to exceed 2,000. That's that primary amendment. Now, if I thought I could get away with 3,000, I might make the motion to amend it to, but I don't want to irritate everybody to where they don't even want to buy it. So I have to be careful about that. So I'm not going to make any more amendments. Now we have not to exceed 2,000, and we get a yes vote on that. Then, I'm sorry, now we have not to exceed, and I had the 4,000 pass, so I'm sorry. Not to exceed 4,000. Now, this is the main motion as amended, and this is the vote, which is a yes or a no on the computer. Make sense?
Basically, you're working backwards, right?
Go up the ladder and then back down the ladder, and with only one exception, you go down one rung at a time. And just so you know, that one exception is number 13 on your list. That's postpone indefinitely. Postpone indefinitely is a way of killing a motion. And if the postpone indefinitely is passed, then you don't come back down to main motion. That's the only time you don't go back down. Any questions on precedence of motions? Want to have that little list in front of you when you are in a meeting if you're chairing. Let's go to the next page. And, oh, now I got to go through some more of this. I'm sorry. Now we're going to talk about the meaning of a vote. A majority vote is more than half. It is not half plus one. Half plus one only works half the time. So it's more than half of the votes cast. 2/3, the easiest way, you can do the divide and multiply thing, but the easiest way is to double the number of no votes, and you have to have that many or more. So if you had 10 no votes, you have to have had 20 or more yes votes for a 2/3 to have passed. So don't do the divide and multiply, just take the number of no votes, multiply it by 2, and that's the number you need for it to pass.
Okay, I can think of
Yeah.
times in the past with a board of 7 where we've had 3 no votes and 4 yeses, but it still passed. You're saying that's not correct?
If it's a majority vote, and you had 3 noes and 4 yeses, it did pass.
Okay,
But if it's a 2/3 vote, it had
okay,
4 yeses and 3 noes, you needed 6 yeses, and you haven't got that many people.
okay. Thank you. It was a misunderstanding. That's why I wanted it rephrased. Thank you.
Okay. So the bottom line is, if you've got, let's talk strategically, if you're trying to get something to pass that has a 2/3 vote,
We don't usually
you
have
can't
that.
have more than 2 no votes.
I was gonna say, we don't normally have something that says.
I know, but you do sometimes. They won't be in main motions as much as they will be in secondary motions.
Okay,
Most main motions have to go by majority vote, although there are some groups who have certain things that have to go by a 2/3. Okay,
Does the
but you have to watch that with you all, because 5 to 2 will pass, but 4 to 3 won't. So you have to, okay?
that's if you need a 2/3.
Nancy, can I ask a quick question about
Sure
2/3
can.
votes? Did you, I don't know if I think I misunderstood you. Did you say, the 2/3 vote applies to secondary?
There are some secondary, well, I mean, I can't think of any examples right now, so I'm gonna take that back and think about it
Okay.
more later.
That's fine,
But
thank
you'll
you.
find that in the chart that I've got for you.
Okay, thank you.
There is a secondary, and object to consideration is a secondary, and it takes the 2/3. Limit or extend the limit of time, so there are some, but not
Oh.
many.
Okay,
Okay,
so I did, to limit the amount of time, what are we talking about? Tabling
well,
something?
let me go with this, let me finish this, and then I'm gonna get to a table, and you can ask me anything about that's on that table. Okay?
Surely, thank you.
But, okay, plurality means the largest number of votes. So some things, and sometimes in governmental bodies, it can be passed by a plurality.
We don't have that
So
issue.
that's just the largest number of votes. And then abstain only means you simply are refraining from voting. So your vote doesn't count one way or the other because you're refraining from voting. The presiding officer votes only when their vote will affect the results. If it's a ballot vote, they will vote right along with everybody else. If it's a roll call, their name is called last. And then in other situations, they will vote if their vote affects the results. And there's a table at the bottom of what is my page, little 9 page. And the table tells you that if a majority vote is required, and there are, and by the way, let me go for just a moment, go back up to the previous table on that page. Remember that when it says a majority, you have to look at what majority you're talking about. Is it a majority of the members of the organization? Is it a majority of the members present? Is it a majority of the members present and voting? So look at your rules. When it tells you it's a majority vote, see what it says after majority. See if it says which of those 3 it says. Now back down to that last one on page 9. If the vote is 13 to 13, the presiding officer can vote yes, because 13 to 13 fails. 14 to 13, if they vote yes, it's 14 to 13. And that then is a majority vote. They can, if it's 13 to 13 and they want to vote no, they can't because it'll fail without their vote. And they can only vote when their vote affects the result. So that chart will help you in reading through that.
So if it's a tie,
That
you're
makes
saying
sense?
it's a yes.
I'm on small number 9. Page,
Right.
that page, the bottom half, the last table where it says presiding officer votes.
Yes. But you're saying
But
if the
she
vote
has-
is 13-13, yes is the result.
No, 13 to 13 is answering the question, can the presiding officer vote?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, they can vote if it's 13 to 13, if they want to vote yes. But if they want to vote no, they can't.
Okay,
Because it's going to fail with or without their vote, so their vote doesn't affect the results. This is just a table telling you when in these situations, when the presiding officer can vote.
Our presiding officer is equal to other trustees. Do you mean the president? Is that what you mean?
Well-
Our president's vote counts.
That your president's vote, you go by, I'm telling you here what Roberts tells you.
okay.
And your statutes, if they tell you, and they do, I think, don't they say that the presiding officer, what do they say about the presiding officer's vote?
In our bylaws, it does say that the president may vote. Our
Yes.
bylaws state that.
Yes.
Okay, but you have to go by state statutes, which I'm just making a point that has nothing to do with what you just said, okay? But because we have to make sure that state statutes don't say something different than your bylaws, because state statutes trump your bylaws.
I have not seen,
Right, okay.
I have not seen
Thank-
anything in the state statutes that precludes
I don't think
the
there
president.
is.
No.
I was just gonna make that point though about the Just wanted to make that point about them trumping it. So this is not something, this bottom table is not something you need when you're sitting on the library board, but if you're at a club meeting or an organization that you belong to, then you would use that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
The next couple of pages, page 10 and 11, are a script for you on the words that you use when you're the chair and you're, or when you're a member, but when you're the chair and you're processing a motion. And that's just there for information for later.
Oh my gosh, that's nice.
What?
Oh, sorry, I'm just talking to myself. This is the procedure I used to use. Never mind, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Page 12, 13, and 14 are what Roberts tells you should be in and shouldn't be in your minutes. It tells you the first paragraph, under content there, the first paragraph tells you what should be in the first paragraph of your minutes. The body should include all of the things listed below that, all the way down to where it tells you on the next page, the last paragraph tells the hour of adjournment. It tells you what does not go in your minutes. The opinion or interpretation of the secretary does not go in your minutes. The judgment phrase such as heated debate, valuable comment, those do not belong in minutes. Discussion. Minutes are a record of what was done, not what was said. Well, you got excited.
Yeah, can't help myself, and I just can't hide it.
I have a question back on the, right before that, Nancy, on page 12. The last sentence says, "The assembly may order that a report of great importance be entered into the minutes." What would you consider a report of great importance?
That would be a judgment call on the assembly's part.
Okay. So we could vote on that then.
And a report like that would be attached to the minutes.
Not necessarily in the minutes, but attached to it.
Yes. Because if it's attached to the minutes, it's considered in the minutes.
Yeah,
It's considered a part of the minutes.
but you're not changing the wording in the minutes, you're attaching it to the back. So if
Right,
somebody
you're saying somewhere in the minutes, see attached motion,
Yeah,
or
For,
see attached report.
for instance, Nancy, at our last board
Yeah.
meeting, there were some comments made by trustees that were then requested to be put in verbatim.
That is really not appropriate. But you all have to make a decision of how you're going to handle that.
And if the board decides that if a verbatim quote would like
By
to be.
majority vote,
It can be added, but we also discussed that whomever is making something they would like quoted verbatim would also submit a written copy.
yes.
Okay.
But remember, that is not the purpose of minutes. The purpose of minutes is a record of what was done at the meeting, not what was said at the meeting. So that's why it's so important, okay?
Nancy, can I just ask a question on another level regarding minutes? I believe it was brought to our attention that when we record our minutes, we need to include the subject that was discussed in the case it should go to court. So that means that they need to have some detail so we can be able to, I think, defend our position. How
Do you
does
keep your record, do you keep your recordings?
Yes.
We do, but this was a comment made regarding our written recording, our written minutes. So is that not true? As long as you have the video or the audio, depending on which meeting, then that will suffice?
Robert says that you should not add anything to the minutes that, and this is, you know, been around for a long time, nothing in the minutes except for these things that were, you know, it's a record of what was done, not what was said.
Okay.
So technically, somebody should not, and in order to get, like if I said something really brilliant at this meeting, and I'd like to have it included in the minutes, you better get a vote to whether or not to include it in the minutes.
Okay.
Nancy, I believe that this question is related to the minutes of the closed session meetings specifically.
Oh, that's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, thank
Can you open up that ballgame, or is that in the
Ballgame.
future?
Pardon me?
Can you bring up that ballgame, or is that in the future?
You'd have to bring it up.
It's up to you. This is your show.
Well, I understand, but I would think the way I understood the attorney is basically what you said. Put down there what was what was the topic of discussion, and but see, in closed session, you're really not supposed to vote.
No, and the closed session doesn't, you gotta be really careful in closed session.
Exactly. You're
If
not.
that gets out, you're talking legal problems.
I know. So, we are supposed to, from my understanding, do the minutes where we are mention the topic and but not, you could give bullet points, but not word for word. Not,
In your regular minutes.
in the
that's
written
accurate,
I'm talking
that's
about.
What?
And even with that, I was told, and this is something,
By the attorney?
director, that if we have the minutes and we're voting on them, they don't necessarily have to be passed to be open. In the past, we were,
I'm not sure what you just said.
okay, let me try and explain. In the past, when we had closed session, we were strongly encouraged that we should keep personal information out of them so that we can vote to open them. So then we're done with them. But I've been told more recently, and even from talking to the attorney, in case of a lawsuit, we kind of have to put, okay, this was a discussion about Joe Smo, and we decided this action, discuss this action. But we have to put it in there in
I'm gonna stop you
case.
there.
Okay,
Let me stop you there, because if this has to do with a legal issue, I'm not qualified to answer it.
okay, cool. So that's
You
up to
ask
the
your
attorney.
attorney that. I'm
Okay,
the one that's an expert in Robert's rules.
okay.
He's an expert in the laws that as they apply to library boards.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Nancy, do you have any recommendations for closed session minutes related to Robert's rules? Or is that something you're referring us to the attorney about?
My experience and the stuff that I've learned is they shouldn't be floating around in emails. Things like that. You need to really do everything you can, because you let some of that get out and it's just, you can be really big trouble.
The question is related to how much detail to put into the minutes. Should it look similar
Okay,
to?
that I would ask the attorney.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
I don't want to get into something that's outside of my expertise.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
The last 2 pages is a cheat sheet that I put together back when I was writing my books, and I've updated since. And if you look at, first of all, on page 15, and then it's getting so small.
Which is actually the large 16. Her 15 is our 16.
Yes, but, oh,
Sorry, don't mean to be correcting
that's
you.
okay. I have a 15 and a 16.
Yeah. And then 16 is our 17. We have, because
Okay,
we have another page, a
15.
cover page. That's why these are all a page later.
my 15 and my 16 is what I'll be referring to, if that'll make it clear.
Yes.
Clear. Okay, on my 15, remember we did the precedence of motions,
Yes.
the top 13 motions?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you have on my page 15. Now, suddenly I have 14 and before I had 13. The reason is because I divided the number 11, amend and amendment, and amend, wait. Number
see.
12 is amend a motion, so it's amendment, and number 11 is an amendment. So I divided amendment into two. And that's why you have one extra number from where you had it earlier in this process. Does that make sense?
What's the difference?
The difference between when you, if you look at number 12, you are amending a motion. The motion is that we purchase an XYZ for $25.
Okay.
Wouldn't be that. But anyway. And you wanted to amend the motion from an XYZ to an ABC.
Okay.
That's amending the motion. Number 11 is you amend the motion to strike XYZ and put DEF, then you would be amending DEF, because that's the amendment to that motion.
Okay. So if we go back to the ladder that you had before, okay, I understand.
I've separated those in this one because you'll notice that that one is amendable and the other is not.
Nancy, I have 14 on my ladder and on page 15.
Where's my
There's
ladder?
14 steps on both pages.
What page is that?
Your page 8 is the ladder.
You're right. I put both of the amendments there too. I
Yeah.
forgot.
All right.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for catching that. So on each of these, you can tell the purpose. Can it interrupt a speaker? Is a second needed? Is it debatable? Is it amendable? And what vote is needed? And then on the second page of this, my page 16, these are in no specific order, just I have a list of some other motions which tell you again the purpose. It can interrupt a speaker if a second is needed, if it's debatable, amendable, and if the vote is needed. What I have done, I put mine back to back and laminated it. And then if I'm in a meeting, I can find that real easy because it's the only thing I've got sitting there that's laminated and it sticks out, so I can get that quickly, and I can get the answer to all of those questions that I need.
Can you please
Questions
explain?
about those two pages? The
Can
basic-
Can you explain what point of order means, please?
Yes. Let's get to it together on the, it's at the top of the second page, point of order. The purpose is request that the rules be followed. So if someone is not following the rules, a member can stand up and say, point of order, and the chair says, please state your point, and then the person explains their point of order, and yes, it can interrupt a speaker. There's no second needed. It's not debatable. It's not amendable, and it's ruled by the chair.
Okay, I have a question on
Right.
this. When point of order has been used in the past, it's been shot down by the chair and saying they're not hearing it. And so,
The chair does not get an option to hear or not hear, so that,
well, that's what's happened in the past. When we've said point of order, we were shot down.
well, but you have to say it for the right purpose. You have to use it for the right purpose. And the correct purpose is that the rules are not being followed, and you're asking the chair to enforce the rules.
We were not given a chance to say why. We were shot down. When we say point of order, we're shot down and not listened to,
Well,
and not
okay.
allowed to say why we were saying point of order.
If I may clarify, those situations, Nancy, if you have a quick second, that was when I was president. And because of the outbursts that we had at our meetings and a lot of controversy, I would read our I think it's our bylaws and our policy about the procedures that we would be following before we started the board meeting. And as I was reading them, certain trustees would yell out, point of order, point of order. So, and it was in the beginning just to distract me, actually. After a time, I asked them to explain or what's your point of order, and it was that they did not, that I should not continue. And what I tried to explain to them is you can't stop the president from reading our policy or our procedures for the board meeting. And so it became a lot of back and forth.
Wait. What did you just say? You can't stop the president from reading the procedures?
In the beginning of the board meeting, and to stop all this chaos, I would say, at this point, I will read our procedures for our open meeting or whatever my statement was. And I would just read either the policy, a line in our policy that addressed that, or our procedures or our bylaws. And that's when they would be screaming, point of order, point of order. So I said, you can't stop me from reading the procedures. What is the point of order? It doesn't apply to that.
It wasn't in the agenda,
I'm
was
sorry,
the
but
point.
I disagree with you. You can't stop.
Okay, so they can prevent me from reading the procedures to have an orderly meeting.
The point was, in my opinion, that I had no problem with it if it was on the agenda. It was never on the agenda. It was just read with it out being
Okay,
in the agenda. Everything else, we were told it needs to be on the agenda, but that never needed to be on the agenda.
According to the attorney, the presiding officer is able to read the procedures or the policy in the beginning of the meeting in order to maintain decorum.
How long are these policies or procedures you're reading? Pages?
No. There was one for
It's a paragraph.
for the participants, that was maybe a half a page, and then there was another half a page that I would read for the trustees so that we could try to maintain some order during our board meeting.
Well,
But anyway, that was when we used that.
The thing that we have to remember is that the person who's presiding has to follow the rules, and if somebody objects, they need to go through that process then.
Yes.
You can't stop somebody from reading something
We
unless
can't
it's
hear you.
in the rules.
Can you repeat that?
Please repeat, because we didn't hear all of what you said.
I don't know what's happening, that it's breaking up, I'm sorry. You can stop somebody from reading something unless it's a part of the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, I have a question. This is Valerie.
Yes.
What is the difference between raise a question of privilege and point of order?
There are certain questions of privilege that you can raise, and I'm not prepared to give you some specifics, I'm sorry. But ask an urgent question regarding rights is what the purpose of raising. I raise a question of privilege in that this rule says that I can do ABC, and I was doing ABC and I was stopped from doing it. That was a generic answer for it, but it's asks an urgent question, urgent, has to be urgent, and regarding rights. So if your rights are being infringed upon, if the time limit is 5 minutes and you've spoken for 3 minutes and somebody then, and the chair gavels you and says you're done, even though the rules are that you have 5 minutes and everybody agrees you've only spoken 3 minutes, that would be a time to raise a question of privilege. Or if somebody else is doing something to you.
Is your question answered?
Any other questions?
I have one more question, Nancy. There are a couple of things in here, such as call for orders of the day, that says only one member vote is needed. How would you decide which member's vote is needed? How does that work?
Oh, let me explain what call for the orders of the day is. Let's say that you are chairing the meeting and you have an agenda in front of you and you went 1, 2, 3, 5. And my pet project was number 4. Then I could call for the orders of the day, which requires the meeting to follow the agenda that's already been printed. The reason you don't need anybody else, you already have the agenda. And you're into the meeting, so that's the why. That's why one person can do it. Does that make sense?
So it's the person
Yes.
who brings it up?
No, it's the necessity of it.
But I mean, the one member's
what your
vote is the
question
person who brings it up?
I'm not sure what you're saying about the person who brings it up.
Is that the vote
I
that
think-
counts?
Yes, that's what it's saying.
Okay.
One member bringing it up.
Is the vote?
Is the vote.
Because we
Okay.
don't need to vote on it, we already have the agenda. Right,
Thank you.
you're right, that's what it's
Following
meaning.
protocol.
That one member, you don't need to then say, anybody else agree that we should go back to number 4, which I intentionally skipped because I didn't like it? No,
Thank you.
make sense
Yes.
now?
Thank you.
Okay, any others? Or any other questions that you might have?
Oh, I had a 2/3 votes question.
Okay,
I was trying to understand when that applies according to the table that you spoke about. Let's see, I think it was. Ashley, now I don't recall. Is there just specific time, do we, as a library board, need to follow 2/3 vote for something specific other than according to me, the only 2/3 vote necessary is for our bylaws? Are there
okay, I'm
some
gonna
other,
convince you that you're wrong.
pardon me?
I'm gonna convince you that you're wrong.
Well, I could be wrong. I'm asking you, what are the
I know,
other
I know,
reasons?
I'm gonna tell you why,
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
okay? A 2/3 vote is required to call the previous question. The previous question, the effect of it is it ends debate and goes right to the vote. Should not more than the majority decide that you are done talking about it. If we are in a situation where many times the minority is trying to change the mind of the majority. And if you can get slammed out every time, then it's not a good system. And that's why anything that takes a 2/3 vote is in protection of the rights of the minority.
Oh, very good. Well, thanks for clearing that up. But
He didn't throw a dart at a board and decide the 2/3. It has to do with things that are protecting the rights of the minority.
so is that something that you can raise as requiring a 2/3 vote in a situation? I've been in this particular situation actually.
Well, you only can raise it if Robert says it takes that. You can't put your own interpretation on that.
So where is it listed?
Because none of us are smart as Henry and Robert III was.
So where is that listed in your handout? The
Last 2 pages,
Small page 15 and small page 16, or big
are
page.
where
I don't even know
are
which
where
one we're-
2/3 of a
question
vote
privilege?
apply?
No.
Yes,
the
the-
last
it
2
tells you
pages.
the very right-hand column, it tells you the vote needed.
I see. Okay, thank you.
There.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. But that's why the 2/3 is needed, or why it has it, is that you have to have, for example, if you look on your page 16, my page 16, objection to consideration. If you object to consideration, and this means that if the objection is adopted, that you can't consider it, then before we've even had a chance to persuade a majority, that minority can shut us down.
I understand.
The 2/3 vote.
Great. I was wondering when it applied. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
The man was brilliant. And he thought of things that, once you start studying him and you get an explanation for something, I many times found myself reading this long explanation and the end of it thinking, wow, wish I would have thought of that. That was the way his mind worked.
Thank you.
Question. I want to thank you for your willingness to serve on a board that serves the public as you do, and you taking your time and your energy to be on the board is admirable, and I appreciate it that all of you do, because we need people who are willing to do that. Anything else from me?
Thank you,
Want to
Nancy.
ask a question?
One
There is
question.
one question.
Okay, and then Valerie, don't forget, I want to talk to you afterwards.
I'll give you a call.
Go ahead.
Nancy, this
Okay.
is Roberto Botello. My question
Yes.
is with regards to committees. So going back to the agenda, when a committee a chairperson of a committee presents a report that requires a vote, and let's take a situation where bylaws are being modified, does the vote go to agree on all modifications, or can the board then selectively handpick and override, in a sense, what the committee brought before for a vote?
Absolutely.
if the committee brought you 4 different suggestions for 4 different changes in the bylaws that have nothing,
We can't hear you.
Hold on, we lost you. Try again?
if the motion is, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, if the motion is 4 different changes, and each of them are independent, have nothing to do with each other, then your question is,
Does the board have the ability to pick and choose?
well, they should, if they have nothing to do with each other, then they should be given as 4 different votes, 4 different motions. But if they don't, and they are truly separable, then there is a motion called divide the question. So if they come up with recommendation A, B, and C, and they're all independent of each other, nothing's depending on the other one, you could move to divide the question, and if that motion is passed, then you would vote on each of them independently.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
oh,
Good, good.
can I slip in a quick one? You had mentioned about not have, a board meeting is not a social time, or how, something to that effect, I don't have the wording correctly, that you're, basically, it's business, you're supposed to deal with what's on the board, not just talk. Sometimes that happens, with, what can you do?
Well, the chair can call the meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
And if the chair doesn't, and people are talking and you are maybe having trouble concentrating, you can, if they're not being called on by the chair, the chair should be the one to say, you need to be quiet so that everybody can hear and concentrate on this issue.
thank you.
But if the chair doesn't, you can raise your hand and say, could the chair please help get to where there's not so much talking in the room? It's very distracting.
Thank you.
Nancy, related to the question that Roberto asked earlier, at what point, if there's disagreement on several recommendations from a committee, would you recommend that something be referred back to the committee? Or is that part of Robert's rules?
That is part of Robert's rules. What I would first recommend is, again, if they're independent of each other. So if, they don't both have to do it the same and, same section, and if you only get one of them, it'll sound stupid, that kind of thing. If they're all independent of each other, you as the chair could even say, if there's no objection, the chair has decided that the chair would like to take 4 votes on this, 4 different issues, because they are independent of each other. And then you would have a motion made on the first one, have a motion and vote on it, second, go right down the line.
I'm more trying to
Is that what you meant?
clarify, I'm more trying to clarify what you said in the beginning of the meeting, where the board should not be doing committee work. If you could expand on that. Because we haven't really had committees in the past, from my understanding, at least not with the current iteration of the board.
Okay, if you don't have committees, then you don't have to worry about you are doing all of the work.
We just
But if you
started
have-
having committees.
Okay, the committees, if you give something to a committee, then encourage the committee, if you want that to be brought up, encourage the committee to bring something back so that the board can vote on it. But you want to be careful about giving them to a committee and a committee goes out and gets lost in them. But you want to be bringing things in, and the chair should follow up with the committee and make sure they are bringing them back. bringing, doing their research and coming back with the information and giving the information to the group and maybe even giving a recommendation.
Right. Excuse me, can I interject if you're finished with your response, Nancy, regarding committees? We have had them in the past. They were dissolved by a previous director because at that time our committees did involve the public and they were seated on the committees, and that was something that particular director really wanted to eliminate. But the purpose of our committees are to discuss or evaluate and come up with recommendations for the board to decide. So irregardless if we agree on them or we disagree on them, I think the final decision still lies with the board. So I think it's fair to say if the board is not in favor of certain aspects of the committee's recommendation, I would think it would need to go back to the board with either our input or for a second recommendation. But I just want to make sure we don't lose the fact that the decisions on any committees are made at the board of trustees level.
Yes.
So is that what we're saying here?
That wasn't my question. It was just a matter of if the committee, for example, if we're working on bylaws or policies and there are recommended several changes, and then we go into a board meeting and there's debate on all of the changes recommended, say there's 10 of them, for the sake of efficiency, would that be recommended back to the committee? That's my question.
Well, efficiency, I think the fact of the matter is we need to have decisions that work for the library and the community. And sometimes some things take longer than others, especially if you're working on bylaws or policies which haven't been reevaluated for quite a long time. But sometimes I think timeliness may not always be at the forefront. I think it's content that we have to worry about.
Valerie, would you
So
ask
unfortunately,
me
yes, they may go back.
Valerie, would you ask me the question one more time?
At what point, for the sake of efficiency's sake or what have you, would you recommend that, for example, if there are 10 changes recommended to a policy by a committee, and all 10 changes are then questioned by the full board, at what point would you recommend referring it back to the committee for further review, as opposed to debate by the full board until it's ready for a decision again? Or do you have such a recommendation?
I do. First of all, we don't have to buy all 10 or dump all 10. So one of the first things that, and this could be not even a committee member, but one of the board members who says that it seems to me that there's agreement on the committees by the board on 1, 2, and 4. Could we consider pulling 1, 2, and 4 separately, vote on those at this meeting, and then send the rest back to the committee for them to work on?
Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Look for, if you've got a long list, look for any that you got agreement on and pull, because almost always some of them you do. Pull them out, get them done. Then when the group comes back next time, they've gotten a feel for what'll pass, and they have also gotten a feel for, what I can get away with and what I can, what's going to go with this group and what's not.
Perfect.
And
and then they can go back and start working around those others.
you need a supermajority anyway.
Where are some things that I think we can get some agreement on at this meeting? Can we pull those out and then refer the rest back?
Perfect. Thank you. That's really helpful.
And you need a supermajority for anything to change anyway.
For the
pertaining
bylaws
to- For the
specifically.
bylaws. Policy, you don't need a supermajority.
Well, and what you're referring to as a supermajority, is a generic term, and each bylaws is many times different. Yours are simply a number of those people who have members who have to vote in favor of it.
Right.
Yes.
Normally in bylaws, it's more like a 2/3 vote with notice. That's one of the things, if you do change your bylaws, look at that amendment of the bylaws. Previous notice at the notice at the previous meeting is usually considered a good idea for bylaws, so that you have some time to play around with it and think it through and think of the disadvantages and such. And a 2/3 vote is a good thing. And that's 2/3 of the members present and voting. Any other questions for me?
Thank you, Nancy.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you for your
Doing
help.
important work. Remember how important your work is, because it is very important to the organization and to the community. Because without a library, oh my gosh, look at what all the children wouldn't learn and what the adults couldn't go look up and pretend like they knew the answer to in the first place.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
very much.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I hope this met your needs.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. And I also want to thank all of the trustees and board members for attending this continuing education and supporting it. I think it's really valuable for all of us, and I really appreciate you all being here. So thank you so much.
Me too.
Arranging.
Thanks.
Okay, what time are we ending?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second,
Thank
third,
you.
fourth, fifth.
Motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:41 PM.
I'm sorry, who
We
motioned
need a
first?
vote.
Patty.
I was the
Patty,
motion.
And thank you, Roberto, and let me do the vote.
Third
Trustee
and fourth was who? Trustee Kadir?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Derblick?
Yes.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
He's not on anymore.
Okay. And President Keane?
Yes,
Thank you.
8:41. Thank you.
Thank you.